Hey, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica and I appreciate you being here today to talk about some books. I know it's been a little bit. That's because everything has been totally chaotic for me in the last couple of weeks, and I expect it to be like that for the rest of the month of July because I have some pretty big travel planned for July. What I'm going to do in this video, like I've been doing, I'll put some chapters along the bottom so you can jump around if you want to. I'm first going to talk about my trip that I have coming up because that is actually book related, or at least part of it is book related. And then I'll talk about the books that I read in June, and then we'll talk about the books that I'm currently reading and that I have planned to read hopefully on my TBR for July. So I have coming up here in the middle / end of the month, I'm going to be going to Comic-Con out in San Diego, which I'm really excited about. I've never been to Comic-Con before, but I've wanted to go for a really long time. For those of you who have been to Comic-Con, you probably understand why everything has been total chaos for me recently with trying to get this planned. If you have not, you're not familiar with Comic-Con, we bought our badges at, I think it was the end of last year during the website. They have their lottery sale. So we got them then, but they don't actually release the schedule for the con until now. So it's within 2 weeks of the convention is when the schedule gets rolled out. So it's just a lot of last minute chaotic planning, strategizing the logistics of the schedule. And for me, who is a planner, I just have to accept that it's a last minute thing and I just have to deal with it. But that's kind of where all of my energy is going at the moment and has been going, is to planning this. But that's okay. There's supposed to be a lot of authors at the convention, which I'm pretty excited about. There's quite a few that I really want to get in to see. I know Wesley Chu is supposed to be there. Martha Wells is going to be there. TJ Klune. I'm not sure what the line is going to be like for TJ Klune and Martha Wells, considering how popular they are as authors, but I'm hoping to get their autographs. Johnny Compton is supposed to be doing signings there, which his debut novel just came out this year. I read it. It was The Spite House. It's one of my favorite books that I read this year. It was a great haunted house story. Travis Baldree, also one of my favorite books that I read this year, Legends and Lattes. He's supposed to be there. I think they're doing an advanced reader copy giveaway too for Bookshops and Bone Dust. Oh my god, I would love to get that. But again, I would imagine with his popularity, I don't know how realistic that's going to be. Sylvia Moreno Garcia, I think she's going to be on a couple of panels there, which there's one of them I think that I'm gonna try to work in to actually get in to watch it. Pierce Brown will be there, but again, I imagine he's gonna have a crazy line, so I don't know that it's gonna be realistic for me to get in and get his autograph. And probably the person I'm most excited about for Comic-Con is gonna be Felicia Day. I'm including her in this list because she is an author. She's published a couple of books, but I'm mostly a fan of her from 20 years of watching her as an actress and the content that she puts out online. So I'm really hoping to get in on her panels and to get an autograph. That's probably my number one that I'm going to try to do at the con. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get any photos or video that I can share at the convention. I'm going with someone. I'm not sure how he's going to feel about having content published, so we'll see. I'm gonna respect, if he is, because as far as I'm aware, he does not do any content creation, so I'm certainly gonna respect someone who doesn't want to be broadcast on the internet outside of their control. So we'll see. But if I can get any author autographs, for sure I will share those in my July update because I'm very excited. I'm very excited for this. Any of you guys going to Comic-Con? Let me know. I mean, it's my first year, so if any of you have been, if you have any tips, would love to hear them because I'm a total newbie, so let me know. But we are here primarily today to talk about what have I been reading in June. I didn't get through a ton of books in June because of all of the aforementioned planning I've been doing, but I did get through, I got through a decent amount. I'm already at my reading goal for the year. I mean, what's a read? what is the requirement for reading? There isn't one. It's not, a competition. I read for fun. So what I get through is what I get through. And I had some pretty good books that I read this month. I also had a couple books I didn't, I could take it or leave it. So what I'll do is I will start from books that I like the least to the books that I like the best, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll talk about the books that I've got coming up next. The first book I read was All Good People Here. I rated it 2 stars. I went into an in-depth discussion on this. I think it was in my mid-month update, so I will link to that video if you want to see more in-depth thoughts, because I don't want to just rehash the same thoughts here. So I'll link to that below if you want more in-depth, and I'll briefly go over some of the points of, what I actually thought about this book. This is supposed to be a mystery, like a true crime mystery, where our main character is investigating a murder of a little girl that happened when she was a kid. And you can tell from the offset, like when this book starts, that this is basically just a telling of JonBenet Ramsey, which I think many of us are familiar with. If you're not, it was a little girl that was murdered in the 90s. This is, again, not a spoiler, because truly it's within like the first couple chapters. If you've heard anything about JonBenet, you're gonna say this is based on JonBenet. So the author, I mean, I'm not opposed to like ripped from the headline stuff, like Law and Order. OG Law and Order is like one of my favorite shows of all time, and that's significantly a lot of those episodes are ripped from the headlines, so I really don't mind when it's done well. So I continued reading even after I realized this was basically just going to be based on JonBenet. As the story went on, it just got harder and harder for me to buy into what was happening, for me to buy into character behavior. There were way too many convenient coincidences in this story. I didn't connect with the writing. I didn't connect with the characters. The timeline of events ends up being really unrealistic. If you like actually sit down and think about it, it's just not plausible the way things are unfolding. And then the ending is like, it's just abrupt. Like the book just ends. It just ends in the middle of like stuff going on. Like, we've still got stuff going on. What do you mean we're just gonna end here? I really should have DNF'd this book. I really wish that I had that thought for most of the book. I should just put this down, but it was going so fast, and I just kind of turned into like, how ridiculous is this gonna get? And if you're a person who can overlook a lot of like convenient things or inconsistencies in a thriller because like you just want to dive into a true crime story and be entertained, you probably would like this. I didn't think the writing was bad, it just wasn't for me. And I have to admit that I'm probably pretty hard on like mysteries, thrillers, true crime stuff like that. I'm pretty hard on that when I read it, because a lot of those authors, they want you to take what they're doing really seriously and view it really realistically. But that makes me just more skeptical of like the character behavior and different things that go on. So I have to admit I'm a bit biased. I judge books like this probably harder than I judge any other type of books. And I mean, these books are extremely popular, right? That's why so many of them get published. So understand, I am in the minority here, but it just was not a book for me. I regret having read it. It was a 2-star book. I did learn, I think this is the one where the author does like a true crime podcast, right? I don't foresee myself reading anything else from this author. For one, I mean, true crime just isn't really my thing anymore. Maybe it will be again at some point. Like, I used to really enjoy true crime stuff. I don't really anymore, with the exception of OG Law and Order. That will always be like one of my favorite shows. But like, as far as like watching like documentaries or Dateline or things like that, or, you know, listening to true crime podcasts, the kind of stuff just isn't for me anymore. I don't enjoy it anymore at this point. So again, admittedly, I'm a bit biased going into this true crime situation, but that's how I felt about it, my personal feelings on it. If you really like true crime mysteries, you might really like this one. It just was not for me. Raining Men and Corpses. This was also a 2-star book, and I feel bad giving it 2 stars because I think that the reason I gave it 2 stars is not the fault of the author. I think the author delivered what she wanted to. It just is not my thing that I'm looking for. So this is, it's like a cozy little murder mystery, right? But it's not. Like, that's how it's presented, but it's more of like a romance with a little murder mystery tied in. It's definitely, I would say, romance first. So if you like cozy stuff and you like romance and you like mystery, you probably would enjoy this. It was cute. I could see it being really appealing for people who, they like romance and they like cozy mysteries, and like perfect little combination. But I don't really like to read romance stories. I don't mind incidental romance in the books that I read, but when it's like that is a leading plot point, is the romance, like capital R romance, it just doesn't appeal to me. I continue to read it because it's set in Northern California, and like I'm from Northern California, so I'm kind of a sucker for things that take place there, and that's why I continued to read it. But I didn't really get into the main character. It somehow felt like, even though we saw her extensively and everything from her point of view, I still felt like she felt pretty generic by the end of the book. What I would have liked to see, her grandma was in this book. Her grandma was like a little side character. I would totally read a book based on the grandma in this book. She was so sassy. She was so funny. She was like getting out there, doing some investigative work. I would totally read a book that this author wrote about the grandma in this story because she was awesome. But this is the first book in a series, and I'm assuming it's going to continue with the romance of the main character because that was definitely left open-ended. But it just wasn't for me. But if you like cozy romance and cozy mystery, you might really like this. It wasn't written badly. It just wasn't, once again, it just wasn't for me. All right, my 3-star book was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. And I have to say, still, I see, like, every time I see it, I just love how they made the water shiny on this cover. I rated it 3 stars, not because of the story itself. I like the story. Like, I've seen the movies, for Treasure Island. Muppets Treasure Island, hello, that's like one of my favorite movies. At least it was when I was a kid. I should rewatch that. I haven't watched it in, I don't know, maybe 15 years or something. But it's got Tim Curry and the Muppets, so, like, I'm sure it holds up. But we're not here to talk about that movie today. We're here to talk about this book. The only reason I rated this 3 stars was purely because of the language used. And by that, I mean it's written in like old-timey pirate language. And me not being like an 18th or 19th century pirate, I struggled through a lot of this. And a lot of the time, I could only really discern what was going on because I've seen the movies. So it's not a bad book. I would say it's fun. I could totally see why kids in like the 1800s would get a total kick out of this. And I absolutely see why this is an awesome book for adaptation. I mean, it's pirates going to an island to look for treasure. Like, what is not enjoyable about that, right? But the language, I think probably many people would struggle with, even though this is like a kid's book. The piratey, old-timey language is a bit of a struggle. You're probably going to have to look up a lot of the words that are in here, not because they're particularly challenging, but because it's a version of English that I think well over 90% of us don't speak at this point. It's kind of like if I go to this, like when I go to the South, there's been times where I'm like, I have no idea what you guys are saying in certain parts of the South. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It's just a different like English dialect that I'm used to because I'm not from southern states. So it's like that except amplified by like 50. There's a lot of pirate speak going on in the way that this is written. It is fun if you're looking for like a children's classic. I wouldn't say this is bad. Just be prepared for the language to probably be a little bit of a challenge for this book. 4-star book, Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. I was pleasantly surprised to be able to give this book 4 stars. I ended up really enjoying reading it. I think by far it's the best book so far in this series. It's book, what is it? It's the 4th full-length novel in this series. I believe that this is literally the halfway point in the full-size novels in the series. This one, the pacing was by far, once again, the best in the series. I've really struggled in the previous books where the pacing is just off. Like, this author seems to be able to do a good setup to a story and a solid end to the story with like a lot of action and storyline comes together and things get wrapped up. But man, the middle of her books have been a real struggle for me to get through until this one. This one didn't feel slow. It didn't feel like we kind of got lost in the middle. It felt like solid pacing through the whole story. So I was very pleased because this was not a small book. What was this? This was like 600, it was almost 650 pages, and I don't want to be struggling through the middle of a 650 page book. That's not enjoyable. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the rest of the series is going to be better pacing, because by this point, I mean, Sarah J. Maas has written several books, so I would assume with more experience, she's gotten more comfortable with developing the pacing. I did do an entire video on this book, so I will link that down below if you want to see my in-depth thoughts on this. I have a spoiler section and non-spoiler section in that video, so whichever flavor you choose to not be spoiled or to be spoiled, you can. But I just to hit a couple of the highlights here, I thought the character development in this one was pretty good. I really enjoy seeing the chapters are being told from different perspectives, which is extremely helpful because things are going on in different locations. And I also care, to be honest, I care more about the side characters than I do about the main character. This lady right here, I care more about the side characters than I do about her. I still find her unlikable, and I'm not quite sure yet if that's the author's intention or not. I'm still unsure, and we're 4 books in, so I guess the rest of the series will tell. I am, with how much better this book is, I am looking forward to reading the next one. I hope the progress continues. This book also sets up like a huge turn of events for all of the characters, and so it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see what happens next because the game has changed. There's political intrigue, there's the potential for magic to play key parts in this, and I think that the author has given herself a really good foundation where she could branch this out in so many different ways, both like interpersonally with the characters, like politically with the characters, and definitely there seems to be so much potential for magic. I really want to see some magic happening. Like, give me some more. So I hope that I will continue to like this. I was, like I said, very relieved I could give this book 4 stars because the last one, especially, like the one before this, it was so hard to get through. This one was not. So please, Miss Sarah J. Maas, I really, really hope that you give me more of this because I'll be excited to read the rest of the books in the series if they're continuing to be like this. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. I also gave this one 4 stars. I really thought this book was so well done. It's a YA novel, but it didn't read to me that way. I could see it being geared towards teens, but I think that adults have just as much to take away from this as a teen would. I think that, adults can relate to this in a different way with the benefit of hindsight to our teen years. But I think teens reading this would feel a lot of connection with the main character. This story follows a teen girl. She's the daughter of immigrants from Mexico, but she herself was born here in the US. And she and her family live in Chicago. The story picks up right after her older sister is suddenly killed in like a tragic accident. And so we see her and her family trying to cope with the loss of the sister. And unfortunately, the main character seems to kind of be the scapegoat of the family. She's always being compared to her older sister. Even before her older sister was killed, she was being compared to her, but now especially, of course, she feels that pressure because her older sister, who was perfect in life, is now dead, and so she'll always continue to be perfect, never have an opportunity to do anything wrong or make her parents or the rest of her family or public perception anything other than she was perfect. And so our main character really struggling to develop her own identity and be appreciated and loved for who she is herself, instead of being held up to this perfect comparison that she feels she's never going to live up to that ideal. And I think that it's extremely relatable for any of us who have ever been a teenager. Those kinds of feelings, wanting to be, trying to find our own identity and wanting to be seen for who we are instead of being held up to others, the expectations of others. I think anyone that's a teen or has ever been a teen is going to relate to these feelings, as it's just such a universal experience, I think, and a very, non-professional psych opinion. I think it's a pretty universal feeling for teenagers to just want to feel like they belong in the world and want to find their place. And this was so well done. I really recommend it. If you're looking for a high quality YA novel, either for yourself or for a teen that I really would recommend picking up this book. I thought that it was great, and I am interested to see if the author has written anything else, because I would for sure be open to reading other things by this author. And The Well of Ascension, the second book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. I did do an entire video on this book, so once again, I'm not going to rehash my full thoughts right here, but I will link that video down below. I did rate this 4 stars while I rated the first Mistborn. I rated that 5 stars only because the first one really sucked me in. It was very it was a heist, it was action packed, there was so much going on, and it really drew you in immediately. This one was excellent, but it just didn't have that same pull. This was more focused on political intrigue, which I do like when it's done well, and I think that this was done very well, but it's just not that same level of oh my god, that a heist is gonna have. So don't take the 4-star rating as bad. Really, when something is 5 stars, it's because I think I got wild enjoyment out of it. So this was a solid 4 stars though. I really loved it. Like I said, this one was focused more on political intrigue of, what happens next after the events in the Final Empire. So I really loved, again, seeing more character development in this. We definitely got to see more development of characters that we really only got a little taste of in the first book, and the author expanded on them, Sazed, which, okay, I said this in my actual dedicated video, and I have to say it now. I know there's some characters in these books that I am not going to pronounce their names the way that I think they're supposed to be, or most people do. But as I said in that dedicated video, I did go on the internet. I took to the internet, and the author, one Mr. Brandon Sanderson, he said he's perfectly fine with people pronouncing the names in his books however they would pronounce it to themselves, because it's personal experience, and he views his in-world characters as having their own language and culture and how they would pronounce things. So I know he said that even he doesn't pronounce names the way they're supposed to be pronounced in the world, which I thought that was a really interesting perspective on it. I can respect that. So I apologize if my pronunciation of some of the characters is irritating. It's just I see spelling and my brain just does what it wants to do with how it's supposed to be pronounced. So I'm sorry. Like Sazed, I think most people pronounce it like Sazed or Sazed, right? Something like that. I know I looked it up a couple of weeks ago, but it's already left my brain because I see his name and I think Sazed. So, anyway, having said all of that, Sazed is like my favorite character. We got to see so much more development for him in this book, which I really, really enjoyed. Sanderson also, like, he answered quite a few questions that I think we all naturally had from the first book. But he also raised some new questions where I'm like, okay, well, like, I have to keep reading because you've given me information, but that's only given me more questions. So I think, though, that that's a really good strategy. I like an author that makes me want to keep reading to find out what happens next. And I think for his style of writing, he absolutely does that for me. I know that he said he didn't really want this book to just exist as a bridge between the first book and the third book. I don't think this book can stand alone, but I think it's so much more than just kind of like a placeholder to connect the first and the third part of the trilogy. There was so much important information that you get from reading this book, and important events that happen and characters that you see getting developed. I can't foresee that the story would feel complete if you didn't get the things that happen in this book. And I think that he did a really good job striking a balance between giving you what you want, which is giving you just enough information to make you think, well, I have to read the third one because now I need all the information. So I will absolutely be reading the third one, The Hero of Ages. I'm going to be reading that one as soon as possible, but due to my aforementioned schedule, I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be here in July or if I will maybe have to push that to August. We'll see. But absolutely, I'm really excited to see the wrap up for the first Mistborn trilogy. And here we are. We've arrived at the final book that I have read in June, which also means that it's my favorite book that I read in June. This was a 5-star book. I absolutely loved it. Murder Your Employer, The McMaster's Guide to Homicide. This is by Rupert Holmes. Oh my God, I can't convey how much I really, really enjoyed this book. This was so fun to read. The wordplay, it was so witty, it was so smart, it was funny. There was so much of this book that I laughed like, and I don't mean little chuckles or like, no, I mean like laughed out loud at this book. It was just so well written. It was so fun. It was tongue in cheek. And I mean, you're reading a book about this like fancy school to learn how to be an assassin to kill, like, murder your employer. How does that not sound entertaining? It sounds entertaining to me. That's why I read it. But it was so good. And you follow 3 different characters who end up at this school. It's like this secret, kind of like an Ivy League university almost is how it comes across. But it's very secret. No one knows the location of it. So we follow three characters who are like students at this school who all, for various reasons, want to murder their employers. You get to see kind of the training process, and then you get to see the real world implications of what happens from the training process. So if you like wordplay, if you like things that are just kind of like tongue-in-cheek, if you just want to laugh, if you want to have a good time, pick up this book. This was extremely entertaining, and I'm so glad that we read it. My friends and I read it as part of like our first foray into having a little book club. They loved it too. So I absolutely am going to recommend this one. This is for sure one of my favorite books that I have read this year. I have no complaints. Honestly, maybe the only complaint I have is that I want like an entire book of just following the school. Like, give me an entire book set in McMaster's at some point in time and I'll read it. Maybe give me a prequel. I would love that. Just give me more. I found it's kind of like somebody made the equivalent of it being like Hogwarts if Hogwarts was a school on how to be an assassin. Yeah, kind of like that. Give me an entire book that's just completely set in the school at any point in time, and I will read it. This was so much fun. 5 stars. I have no suggestions for how this could have been better. This was really fun, and I was thoroughly entertained by it. All right, I think this is probably a good point to do an update for my Reddit fantasy bingo that I'm participating in for this year. If you also want to participate, I will put the links down below to the sub. Every year, the fantasy sub on Reddit does a bingo where you get different reading prompts, and so you can choose a book that fits those prompts, and you get to mark off a little bingo card. I will put up here, this is my bingo card before, and I do have a new addition to it. I do also want to say there's a lot of uncertainty right now around Reddit due to some issues with like the admins changing like different app permissions and things. So I'm not 100% sure what is going on in the fantasy sub right now, if they're protesting or not. So I am not 100% certain that all of the posts are accessible right now. I think they might be, but just a word of warning, if you go over there and you see anything like a partially, I don't know, partially closed sub or something, you're not seeing any, like it's there. Basically there's protests going on around Reddit, and I just can't keep track of which subs are participating and which are not. So just a word of warning. But anyway, this, as you can see, is my current bingo card. I only have one edition so far, but that's okay. And actually, I probably should have put this up at the end of last month, but it just didn't happen. So I am filling in the prompt for published in the 2000s, and I'm going to fill that space with Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, because that was indeed published in the 2000s and it meets the criteria. So I'm slowly working my way through the bingo card. I think the only square that I don't have an idea for what to fill it with yet is the one with elemental magic. I'm not 100% sure of what book that I would want to read that would meet that yet, but I may have recently gotten a book that includes that. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's just for fun. You don't win anything except, you know, a sense of satisfaction if you get a bingo. So if you also want to participate, like I said, I will put the links to the Reddit fantasy sub down below so you can check it out for yourself. Let's talk about what am I reading right now, because I do have a couple that I'm reading right now and a couple that I would like to read for sure. I don't know how far I'm gonna get in these, but I'm gonna give it a try. I just started reading yesterday Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I had to go get an oil change and I waited at the dealership while I did it, so I took this book to read. Got a pretty decent amount into the book. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm so glad that I got this. I was absolutely right because I initially checked this out from the library and started reading. I read just like a chapter of it and I knew right away I was gonna really like it because of the style. And for sure, I am like 20% in at this point, and I really like it. So I am excited to continue this, especially because I would like to take this book with me when I go to Comic-Con, and if at all possible, get the author to sign it. I think that would be fun. So I'm gonna try to finish this one. It's a pretty fast read. You know, the writing, it flows really well in my brain. So I've been actually able to get through it pretty quickly from when I started reading. This was only like, I don't know, it was like an hour of reading and I got through like 70 pages. So pretty good for an hour of reading. It goes really fast with the way his writing style is, so I'm excited to finish this. Next on my list, right after I finish Under the Whispering Door, I'm gonna try to get through Witch King by Martha Wells. This is the new release. This is the really awesome edition from Illumicrate, and look at that, that's beautiful. So I'm gonna try to get through this one because once again, Martha Wells is going to be at Comic-Con, or at least is scheduled to be. So if at all possible, would love to get a signing on that one. So even though, I mean, technically I think this one's already signed, but it's one of the, yeah, like it's one of those like they gave the author like several thousand sheets of paper and the author's just like psh. So we'll see. I am probably gonna try to take this book with me. We'll see. I've still got to pack. I don't even know. It's gonna be crazy. gonna try to maybe take this book with me to get it signed by the author. You're about to notice a pattern here. I've also got The Art of Prophecy by Wesley Chu. Wesley Chu also supposed to be at Comic-Con. So would love to try to get through this, but I don't have a ton of time before the con starts. So am I gonna get through this giant thing? It's like 500 pages. I'll give it the old college try. No guarantees. The Hero of Ages, of course, the third and final installment into the first Mistborn series. Really want to see how well this wraps up. I'm very excited, and I think that this one's going to be a fast read. The other two have been pretty fast reads when I actually sit down and I get going with them, and I'm anticipating that this is probably going to be a mixture of like the action of the first book with the political intrigue of the second book, and that's what I'm hoping for. And so I do also, as soon as I start reading this, probably need to go out and grab the next book in the order I'm going to read it in, which I also have to look that up. Maybe Elantris at that point. I'm not sure. I'm reading the series in the order that's one of the orders that's recommended on one of the Brandon Sanderson subs on Reddit. So if possible, I will also link to that. If you want to start reading Brandon Sanderson and you're not sure where to start, the Brandon Sanderson, God, try saying Brandon Sanderson like 10 times. It's not easy to keep saying it. If you are also interested in reading the works by this author, because I know there's many, he's got like 30 books or something. This dude is super productive, which I have a lot of respect for. If you are interested as well, I can link below to that sub, because they have different reading order options if you're not sure where to start. And so I went with like a modified publication order. So I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to be reading after this one, but this one should occupy me for the time being. I really, really want to get through this in July, but I'm just not sure I'm going to have the time. It might have to get pushed to August. We'll see. I just got to be realistic. Real life things happen, and we all just have to accept that that's okay. I'm not planning on reading the next book in the Throne of Glass series this month, just because I have too many large books, clearly a time deadline. I've got travel. I just don't think it's realistic to expect that. If I somehow end up having the time this month, I'll do it. But realistically, I think that's probably going to end up being in August. And I really want to watch the new Witcher, but I've decided I really would like to start reading the book series before I go back and start watching The Witcher again. So I don't know when that's going to happen either. Frankly, I need to get some kind of osmosis so that I can just like put the book right here and it just like into my brain. Can we get on that? This is 2023. I really wish that we had some kind of more expedient system for getting books into our brain than just reading it. Yes, I know we can listen to them, but unfortunately my brain doesn't like audiobooks. I wish that it did. I really wish that it did, because I loved being read stories when I was a kid. Even now, I love the audiocast? No. What year is this? Good Lord. The podcast, LeVar Burton Reads. I absolutely love it. But that's just because his voice is so soothing. Like, as a child, I was all about reading Rainbow. So, like, there's a special place in my heart for LeVar Burton. And if you haven't checked out his podcast, you totally should, because he even said it's like reading Rainbow for millennials. And as a geriatric millennial, I can attest that that's a very accurate statement. It's great. Like, he reads you a book in his very like soothing voice. He reads to you. And if you watched Reading Rainbow as a kid, you're going to have all kinds of nostalgic feelings while he does it. But even so, I listen to that more for like the relaxation part of it rather than like being able to retain audio stories. Unfortunately, my brain just does not like to retain information from stories being read to me anymore. Like, it demands that I read a book myself. So that's where we're at. I just have to accept it. That's all that I have for this month. I'm not sure that I'm going to have another video this week because, again, crammed schedule. I'm only one person. But I should have one for next week and the week after that. That's my current plan. And then in August, I anticipate being able to go back to like a 2 video a week schedule, but we'll see. Things unfortunately tend to snowball, so I'm going to be putting them out when I can, but that's my goal. That's my hope. I will keep everything updated as we go. So that's all that I have for you today. I know we kind of went on a whirlwind here, and it feels like I haven't recorded in a while, even though it hasn't really been that long. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I talked about today. Have you read any of them? Do you plan to read any of them? Also, let me know if you've been to Comic-Con, if you have any tips for me. Let me know. I would love to have them because, as I said, I'm a total newbie and I have like no idea what I'm doing. So no, I will not be dressing up in cosplay because it's going to be like really long days. And I'm just like, I don't know, realistically, I'm like, is that going to be comfortable for like 14 hours to be in a costume? I don't know. But I do have some very nerdy shirts. So, you know, I feel like that's my adequate nerd cred. I'm gonna show up in nerdy shirts. Let me know your thoughts. I always love to get feedback here, and as always, I really appreciate you coming by today. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. I'll see you next time. Thanks.